paradigm shift in South Asian studies. I think all of us initially thought that the Indic studies, or what you call Indology in the West, probably suffers from serious colonial hangover. And this is the time to change that. It's time to think of a new frame for South Asian studies. And we have to have our own questions to engage with South Asia. So I have two questions with which I will begin, and I will just talk about why these questions are important, and then I will make few points about how these answers to these questions can help us in redesigning the way we study South Asia. The first question I have in mind is that how do we look at South Asia so that we have a more meaningful dialogue among ourselves? As we know, the geopolitics of today, South Asia suggests that there is a kind of tacit tension between the countries, among the countries. The SAARC that was introduced to bring them together has not been working very well. And I'm really worried about the non-functionality of such important regional organization, and therefore we need to ask a question: how do we rethink about mutual engagement? What kind of study we should undertake to have a better dialogue? And the second question I have in mind is that what does South Asia have to offer to the world, particularly at the moment when we can see there is a global philosophical crisis, there is a change in ontology, there is a fundamental change in the nature of economic production system, there are new philosophical challenges that people are facing. So at this moment, does South Asia have something very important to offer? And therefore, people not only from South Asia, from entire world should engage with South Asia. And therefore, question would be, what kind of engagement is needed? And my proposal is that till now, South Asia has been studied by the non-South Asians as a kind of plural society brought together during colonialism, having a lot of differences in terms of language, religion, communities and all that. And it's kind of conflict-ridden society. That's the perspective with which the Western investigation begins. I think we need to change that. And one change that South Asian people proposed earlier, that was that we should look at this region as a cultural and culturally integrated region. I think even that is not sufficient today, because culture and language, of course, we share, but that is equally a subject of conflict. So what could be the new paradigm? How should we look at the South Asia now that we can have much more meaningful dialogue? And my proposal is that if we try to look at these societies from the perspective of knowledge and practice, what kind of knowledge traditions existed in these societies, how these knowledge traditions are not only shared knowledge traditions, but complementary knowledge traditions. They complemented each other. So we are intertwined despite all plurality. There is one phenomenon that integrates us together, is the kind of knowledge system we have been practicing. And despite lot of plurality, I think there are enough evidence to suggest that South Asia is an epistemic community. An epistemic community means a community First, that it is a community, that we are together, we should be seen as together. The nation state, of course, has decided to divide us in terms of rigid boundaries, and there is a conflict between nation states also, but we can go beyond that and see how this geographical region, having a lot of things common, have been practicing certain kinds of knowledge traditions. They are in mutual dialogue, and that is how this is an integrated space. So my proposal will be that we have to really look at the knowledge tradition, and knowledge not to be defined in narrow sense, but larger sense of the term, in the economy, in philosophy, in institutions, in everyday life, philosophy of life, worldviews. All these things could be included in knowledge tradition when we call knowledge tradition. Recently I was attracted towards South Asia much more due to two interesting novels I read. One by a French novelist, Michel Houellebecq, who is a dystopian novelist, talked about crisis in French society. A human genome scientist. The protagonist is a human genome scientist, and this protagonist is looking at the elite French society and suggesting what the problems they are facing. And the final thing happens that he puts all his research findings on the table of the institution, and then he goes missing. And then it was discovered that his car was parked near the sea beach and he was not there, and the rumor was that he went to Tibet and became a Buddhist. So that's very interesting thing to note, that a genome scientist looking at French society ends up becoming a Buddhist. And this is not the only one novel. I can give many examples, but another very interesting novel by a political theorist, Li Yaqi. The novel is called Freedom. The other novel is called Atomized. And Yaqi, a Marxist, growing in a Marxist society. Then there's a crisis of Marxism, and then suddenly she discovers that she is depressed and she goes to Buddhist meditation center. Which means that today the crisis that humanity is facing is looking towards South Asian resources, and that is important. That's why I think looking at South Asia as epistemic community can help us a lot, and therefore we have to look into the knowledge traditions which can contribute to the global philosophical resources. Let me make a point that why I'm saying these are interconnected communities and they constitute an epistemic community. Buddhism and Hinduism, or Hindu philosophy, what you call, and Jain philosophy, and Sikh philosophy, and Islamic philosophy, so many religious communities, and those religious communities with their philosophies have been living together in this region, and they have population in each nation state, and they have shared experiences of engaging with each other. Recently I discovered that Buddhism's most important text, Tripitaka, 3 texts called Tripitaka, they were documented in Sri Lanka, in Sri Lankan language, Singli language, and in Singli text in Pali language. That's very interesting. And after hundreds of years, Buddhists from India went to Sri Lanka and brought back the text and retranslated that in their own language. a, a thinker who was born in Nepal, migrated to India, sent his disciples to Sri Lanka and other parts of Asia, and all these societies contributed to the evolution of this philosophy in their own ways. You can't say Buddhism is Indian, Buddhism is Nepali, Buddhism is Sri Lankan, Buddhism is Myanmar. Because all of them, or Bhutan, all of them have contributed to the evolution of this philosophy. Therefore, there's an integrated connectivity. Similarly, there is a very important philosophy called Nyaya and Sankhya, developed in some part of India, but went into Bangladesh, went into Afghanistan, and impacted different kinds of philosophies, and then new fertilizations took place, new cross-breeding took place. So this is something very interesting, that this reason we can reconceptualize in a way that philosophies were emerging, ideas were emerging, and transmigrating from here to other parts, and then engaging with them, producing new ideas. This is, if we reimagine this reason in this way historically, and then see how it has evolved, then our perspective towards this area will change, and it will not be very difficult then to understand that these societies or philosophies in these societies were not contradictory to each other. They were complementing to each other. So these are complementary philosophies, and not only complementary philosophies, they were enriching each other. Let us take another example, the Baul tradition of Bengal or Bangladesh. Lalon Fakir was a very famous Baul in Bangladesh, and Bauls are in Bengal and Bangladesh. And who are the Bauls? They are people's philosophers who have combined Sufism of Islam and Vaishnavism that grew in Bengal. So you will find Rabindranath Tagore talking about Bauls, and in a lecture he delivered in England, he said that the philosophy that I have learned from the Bauls of Bengal. That time it was, of course, integrated Bengal. So you see how this entire area, this entire zone was a kind of philosophical zone, having constant exchange of ideas and enriching each other. It's not a philosophical conflict zone, rather philosophically enriching zone. I'll just give one example and move on. In 6th century BC, there was a place called Vaishali in Bihar. Many people must be knowing about Vaishali ki Nagar Vadhu. So Vaishali, can you imagine Mahavir Jain and Buddha and Ajit Kesh Kambal, who was a materialist, all of them were living in 10 kilometers of radius. And entire community, society was debating about these philosophies. The kings were following their philosophies. There are stories and stories about how kings followed those philosophies and what happened due to that and all that. That time, when there was major philosophical conflict, a new philosophy emerged within Jainism, and that was Anekantavada, which suggested that all of us know things only partially. We can only have partial truth, and therefore we should not treat anybody as completely wrong. And we have to really engage with each other. We have to engage in a dialogue with each other. This has become a mode of engagement in the entire region. That's the point I want to make. And therefore, we have to see how these philosophies have created different forms of life in this region. And that is why I'm saying that if we engage with them as knowledge tradition, then this conflicting idea will be easily overcome. Now, what is the global relevance of this? As I said, these two novels suggested, but these are the novels. But go beyond that. The Cartesian dualism that separated mind and body in the West, and that became the foundation stone of modern Western culture and philosophy. In this region, probably, this idea was protested, this idea was challenged, even in the modern period, during the colonial period, and this challenge continued. Therefore, South Asian society has something to offer to the world which was lost in the modern world, modern West. And that is why we will see how there is an interconnection between these philosophies when you try to study them from the modern perspective, and that they present an alternative perspective. I'll come to that point a little later. Let me take 3 dimensions of this shared knowledge and practice where we need to focus. There could be many more dimensions, but at the moment I'm just talking about 3 dimensions and how South Asians shared these 3 dimensions. One is the relationship between humans and nature. What is the modern proposal for this relationship? That humans have to conquer the nature, control the nature, convert nature into private property. The terms they use is exploit the nature. We have to exploit the nature. In South Asian culture, wherever you go, you will find there is a harmony with nature. One of the questions that you can raise and find out answers in different communities, in different societies, and I have been doing this since last many years. Wherever I go, I ask them, how do you think of nature? Who owns natural resources? And the answer that I got in this region is very interesting. Most of them would say, nobody owns natural resources. We, all of us are, including the living beings, other living beings, we all are stakeholders in nature. Vinoba Bhave raised a very big movement called Bhutan movement. And what was the slogan? Sabhay Bhumi Gopal Ki. That we don't own nature. Everybody has claim on nature. Everybody who is born has claim on nature. So this is a very different perspective, something that echoed in Gandhi's idea of trusteeship. That yes, we can control some part of nature, but that we are trustee only, which means we cannot use that only for our own benefit. So today, when world is facing a deep crisis in capitalism, when I'm saying crisis in capitalism, I want to emphasize the point that crisis of capitalism is a philosophical crisis. What is a philosophical crisis? You know, capitalism stands on 2 fundamental principles. One, that greed is good. That if we become greedy, we try to accumulate more. We try to produce more. We want to work. There was a big poem before Adam Smith wrote his book which says, greed is good. So if you are greedy, you will work more. Now if you work more, you produce more. Then the second principle is that whatever you produce is a part of the common good. It should be distributed among the people properly. Over the centuries, over the decades and centuries, you will find that capitalism has abandoned the idea of common good and left with only greed. You will be surprised to know that in 2008, when there was a major economic crisis, the reports produced on that crisis, most of the report make this point that the reason for crisis was the greed. Now, if greed is the reason for crisis of capitalism, then has capitalism created any new philosophy which can suggest that it will be free from the greed? It's not there, and therefore you find globally serious problems coming. Whatever is happening in US today is part of that crisis. one of the reasons of this crisis is that capitalism is no more dependent on human labor. Capitalism has innovated technology for production. So it will replace human labor by artificial intelligence and robotics, and that will create a problem. So if humanity is facing this problem, as Piketty is saying that in the human history probably inequality is highest today, then what is the solution of this problem? I think for the solution we have to go back to South Asian society and see new experiments in this field. There are very interesting experiments going on where people have pulled together their property, or they have given up private property and made cooperatives and made sustainable systems. There is one in Ranchi in Bihar called Chakriya Vikas Yojna. I have no time to explain that, but I have collected not less than 10 to 15 such examples which suggest that common people have brought together their resources and created cooperatives, and that have really produced fundamental results. This is a new phenomenon emerging, but there is a philosophical root in South Asia, and in every South Asian country you will find such experiments happening. There is an epistemic lesson of this, that we can think of ecological democracy, and that is what is the core idea that can emerge from this kind of tradition. The second point I want to make, the first point was human nature relationship and going beyond the private ownership model, thinking of a community ownership, reclaiming the community ownership of South Asia. Second is body, desire and human relations. In South Asian philosophies, what I find very commonly is that they respect desires. Our body has desires. In the modern West, the desire has been delegitimized. In South Asian philosophical traditions, you will find that they want to go beyond desire, not by controlling desire, but by fulfilling desire, or transcending desire, if not fulfilling desire, transcending desire. So you look at Jains, Buddha and Hindu philosophy, many of them have written extensively on that, how to deal with desire and take desire as a legitimate thing. You read famous text called Kam Sutra or Arthashastra. Arthashastra, if you look at Arthashastra, it's very interesting. Kautilya wrote this book, which is one of the major texts of South Asian tradition. It is a book on desire. Only 3 pages on that, but he argues that we have to recognize legitimate desire and illegitimate desire of human beings. How to create a system which can fulfill the legitimate desire of everybody and control the illegitimate desire of anybody. So we take desire as embodied. We are part of that. It's part of our being. Or look at Yoga Sutra. It talks about how do you handle your body and consciousness. So all these ideas give you a very interesting point, that is relationality, the relational energy. Desire is a relational energy. How do you regulate that relational energy? What is happening in the West at the moment, modern West I'm saying, there's a huge alienation. Modernity has produced huge alienation, not only modern West, also in India, in different countries. I think we all are struggling with that. People are getting alienated. People want to die, commit suicide. Aging people, nobody is there to look at them. In these societies, I think this idea that human beings are relational beings, we make our meaning only in relationship with other human beings, that idea has deeply been institutionalized. It's part of the institution making. And therefore you will find many practices in these societies where senior citizens are respected. They are not treated, human beings are not treated only economic agents. The moment you treat human beings as economic agents, then if he is economically invalid, he or she doesn't have any productive capacity, then the person is gone. Then he is useless for society, or she is useless for society. I think South Asian societies have developed theory of relationality and given it certain kind of institutional form and certain kind of cultural form that is there in practice. You go to Sri Lanka, you go to Nepal, you go to Bangladesh, anywhere you go, you will find this relationality is respected. Of course, there is a tension today. This is one of my serious concerns, that how does South Asian society deal with modernity, the onslaught of modernity, consumerism. How do they deal with that? To my surprise, I discovered in Sri Lanka that consumerism is not the core philosophy that people are following today, maybe due to impact of Buddhism. So these are the things one can investigate, and you can see how there is a emphasis on relationality, and that we need to reclaim that relationality. The third thing is knowledge, consciousness, and the technology of the self. As I said, due to dominance of Cartesian dualism in the West, the mind-body separation took place, and as a consequence, the modern West has investigated the body thoroughly, went deep to human genome, started operating on those things, editing started. But in the realm of consciousness, I think there is a big problem. Whereas in South Asian societies, you will find there are several traditions of accessing the self, being conscious of your own consciousness. How do you meditate? Take, for example, Vipassanā. Vipassanā, is a meditation technique introduced by Buddhism, and it emerged probably in Nepal or in India, or in the border of Nepal and India with Buddha, but it survived in Myanmar, and after hundreds of years, one Indian trader, he brought that back from Myanmar to India, and now it's becoming very popular. So this kind of technique of being conscious of consciousness, taking consciousness very seriously, I think is one of the dimensions of South Asian societies. You go to Sufis, you go to Afghanistan, Baul, great philosopher and Sufi thinker, or Nizamuddin Aulia, or you take example of people from different religions, different communities, you will find all of them have shared concern for handling consciousness. And how do you meditate? How do you think at a higher level? How do you think as not only as an individual, but also as a member of a community, a member of humanity, a member of a species being, a member of universe? How do you do that? I think that is also a very, very important concern of these people, and that's where we can learn from them what is called participatory epistemology of consciousness. That knowledge about consciousness, and that is acquired through participation in relationality. It's not only by becoming isolated, but coming together and meditating together, praying together, engaging together, involving with each other, but yet becoming conscious of the self, of the community. I think that is called technology of the self. And that is what is so commonly available in these areas, in these regions, that you will be surprised to see anywhere you go. You go to Nepal, you go to Bangladesh, you go to Myanmar, you will find several techniques are being followed in different parts, but there's a common concern: how do we become conscious of our own consciousness? So I suggest that South Asian societies should be read from these angles now. Should not be only read as plural, culturally plural society, somehow integrated together. No, it's not that. It's an epistemic community, which means that it has certain core values about what is the nature of reality and how do we know the reality, what is human's position in the universe. On all certain these important issues, they have certain things to suggest, and there's a common concern. That doesn't mean that is a single concern. I would say there are multiple concerns, but they are in dialogue with each other. And in dialogue means they are learning from each other, enriching each other, not in conflict with each other. That is the core point I would like to make. Now, what is the methodological implication of my argument, if you accept this argument? I think, one, that we have to introduce something called comparative dialogical hermeneutics. Means our way of interpretation have to be comparative, and dialogical means trying to engaging with each other. It cannot be unilinear. So how do we define the meaning of something? How do you know how Sri Lankan people are practicing Buddhism? By engaging in a debate and discussions with them, by exploring their life patterns, and therefore I call it knowledge and practice. So the practice has to be understood, not only the text. So text and the field, they have to be together, studied together. If you read only the text, you will not be able to understand the complexity of the tradition. So I think the field, and that is where you will understand how there has been engagement between Buddhism and Nyaya, or there has been engagement between Sufism and Vaishnavism, or there has been engagement between Jainism and Buddhism. These engagements are not visible in the text, but they are visible in practice. So South Asian studies cannot be done only through the text. It has to be done through the text and practice together. Third thing I think important is that we have to have what is called epistemic reflexivity. Epistemic reflexivity means that don't follow one definite pattern of understanding the reality. In fact, reality is so complex that you have to be reflexive. You have to be creative while engaging with reality, while trying to understand that. What is reflexivity? Just simple example of reflexivity is that if you are locked in a room and then you are asked to find out the way out, your mind will start working. And this is human capacity, that human beings can solve n number of problems in n number of ways. That is reflexivity. So when you are engaging with reality and the text, you have to be epistemologically reflexive. And then fourth is the plural sources of evidence. Don't depend on one evidence, not only textual evidences, but also folklore, also stories, narratives, everyday life patterns. So many things you have to bring together to understand the complexity. If you don't do that, if you become methodologically too rigid, then probably you will not be able to understand the interconnection between these knowledge traditions. And the final thing that is, I think, very South Asian is the purpose of knowledge. They will ask always, what is the purpose of knowledge? All the texts you read, all the philosophers you talk, they will begin with this idea, what is the purpose of knowledge? And the purpose of knowledge for them is universal human liberation. It must liberate human beings. You read 6 Indian philosophies, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, or Sankhya, Yoga, or Mimamsa. You know, all these texts begin with simple question that human beings are suffering from 3 kinds of problems. Triviz Dahik, Davik, and Bhautik. How to get rid of that? And the text claims that the purpose of the text is to liberate them from these problems. One says that if you have logical thinking, you can come out from that. Other says that if you have capacity to interpret things properly, you can come out from that. Or third says that if you can access your consciousness, you can come out from that. Or you talk to Buddha, who says that dukkha and the nivarana of dukkha. This is a concern. So all these philosophies, I think, have very common concern, that is human liberation, how to liberate human beings. And that should be the vantage point from where we should engage with these traditions. And if we then bring out something new, that will be philosophy for future of humanity. The kind of crisis that humanity is facing today will be serious challenge in years to come. And if we don't discover any new philosophy, probably humanity will be much more difficult for humanity to survive. So I think these ideas that South Asia has are not only South Asian ideas, and that's the point with which I will end my argument, that these ideas are universal in character. If they are not universal, they will not be so important. And this is the moment when we must go back to these cultures and try to see what are the universal ideas that can give us some resource for humanity in general. And 3 points, I will just recap those 3 points: a dialogical ecology, an embodied ethics, and a reflective consciousness. These are the 3 resources that one can extract from contemporary South Asia and the traditions that they have, the knowledge and practice that South Asia has been involved in for the global community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for such valuable insights with us today and truly enriching our minds.
As we approach the end of today's session, we would like to invite Ms. Fareen Sayed to deliver a vote of thanks.
So you don't have question
Thank
answer?
you, Abhishek. Abhishek, just wait for just open the stage for the questioner session.
Yes, ma'am. If anyone has questions, you can ask her.
Yes, William.
Oh, very good afternoon, sir. So my name is Bhutan. I'm from BA English Honors. So you had your 3 arguments, right? I really love the way you said about consciousness. And the last argument that you had was about one should be logical, one should interpret things, and one should have his or her own consciousness, right, sir? So many of my lectures do involve consciousness into my own teachings. And me, on my very own self, do involve consciousness as the main part of a human that I am. So I really had a question. I framed it for you. So how does South Asian philosophy differ from Western philosophy in the way it connects theory with living practices? So like in South Asian, so like for us, it is more about our own consciousness. It unites with knowledge. It unites with practices. But so in Western philosophy, after Enlightenment, it does require inquiry and more of theoretical, like you just said. So how will it differ?
See, that's a very interesting question. You remember Gandhi, he says that I don't trust a person whose kathani and karani, whatever he says and whatever he does, don't match. Or the famous song that Gandhi used to sing, भीतर भीतर बाहर एक ही जानो यह गुरु ज्ञान बताई.
Yes, sir.
ये जो यूनिटी है हमारा, there's a kind of unity that we require to have in our thought and action. in our knowledge and in our practice. That is very important. Suppose you are giving a very nice lecture on democracy. You wrote a wonderful book on democracy, and you are highly undemocratic in your everyday life. So modernity actually in the West differentiates the two. Will really appreciate the text, will not go into the private life. So private and public they will divide. There are so many divisions they have created. South Asian societies don't do that very easily. So therefore, even in the political leaders you will find they are very, very careful about the intention of the political leader.
Yes.
They will immediately say, नहीं इसका intention ठीक नहीं लगता है. Or somebody who will commit mistakes, but tell the people that look at my intention please. And people will appreciate that intention. Even will say, mistake can happen. They will say mistake can happen, but his intention is okay. So this is a very fundamental difference between the modern West philosophies and what is being practiced in South Asia. I think this is something that we need to investigate. I'm not sure. We have to really explore this further. This is a good question to explore. If that is the common part of the collective consciousness of South Asia, and that survives despite intervention of modernity today. I think it survives. It still goes into their everyday life.
So, but we as students, how can we help with the further investigation?
You know, all of us are also students. You are a human being, and
Yes,
you are gifted by God, if we believe in God, or if you don't believe in God, by nature, something called reflexive capacity, cognitive capacity. And it is our purpose of life to become cognitively free, right? The teachers and the books and the classrooms and the universities, their role is only helping you out in becoming cognitively free, right? Unfortunately,
Yes,
probably it may not be the case, but
Yes.
that is the purpose, that avidya se vidya ki taraf jana.
like Dronacharya said. Yes, sir.
Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. That is the idea, that constantly we are being aware of the world, and that's our cognitive freedom. And that right you have as a student, as a human being. Therefore, we all are students in that case. We all are becoming cognitively free every day, trying for that. If you start thinking like that, I think that will become possible. And that has been very South Asian thing. You know, the way South Asian dialogues of in different traditions are there. Say Milind Panna, the dialogue in Buddhism, or all the Upanishads, the dialogue in Upanishads. You will find that there is a kind of debate going on all the time. A teacher and students, they both are on the same plane. They are just debating. And therefore, two human beings are trying to know. That's the idea. Nyaya philosophy says that there are three ways of knowing, or three ways of debating. One is debating to know, one is debating to win, and third one is debating to destroy the debate. So the only first mode is the right mode of debating, that when you debate to know. So in the process of knowledge, all of us are equal and trying to know. That's very South Asian thing, I guess.
Thank you so much, sir.
The next question is Dr. Annapurna. Ma'am, please unmute yourself.
Right. Good evening, and I'm very happy to have been a part of this webinar. You have enlightened us about the collective consciousness that we share in South Asia, culturally, historically, geographically, and so on. But my question is, why are we politically scattered?
Yes, very important. You know, two reasons. One, that colonialism has done a cognitive damage. This is called Orientalism in a way, that there is a vision of us produced by the ruling elite of the colonial power that we have imbibed. So we think that Pakistan and India are two different societies. We are not actually. There is a very interesting book you should read. It's called In Search of Shiva in Pakistan. And this anthropologist, journalist anthropologist, who travels in Pakistan and locates places which are called places of Shiva. And he argues that these have survived Hinduism, these have survived Buddhism, it has survived Islam, and this has survived Christianity, and it is continuing since the Harappan time. It's a very interesting book, a small book, you must read. So I think probably we have started thinking as a nation state. Nation state is not our product. Nation state is a very Western product, who thought there can be one nation, one state, one community, one nation, one state. We can never have it in South Asia. All South Asian societies are multi-community societies, multi-linguistic societies, multi-religious societies. Therefore, the boundary of nation state does not work very well with us. Now in future probably, this is a moment to develop something new for ourselves, that we develop a new model of governance where we maintain the boundaries but have dialogue on every issue, bilateral, trilateral dialogue on every issue to resolve our own crisis. I think SAARC started doing it at some stage, but probably it could not continue for long. Unless we develop that, we will be in trouble. So this political conflict, I guess, is a product of post-colonial or colonial situation.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. So I had a question. In many South Asian traditions, knowledge isn't just intellectual. It's more like embodied, transformative. How can we bring that sense of lived practice in today's universities, like lived practices and something that is very practical? How can we do that for separate thinking from the living?
Yes, I think, I have been arguing this, that one of the cognitive damage that has happened to us is that we have separated our being, thinking and knowing. We think knowing is something outside, very formal, textual, out in the library, and our being is not connected with that. I think we have to reclaim that no, our being itself is important, and knowing about our being, thinking about our being itself is important. Therefore, formal degrees are not very important always. There are people in South Asia who have immense knowledge about water resource management, but has no degree. So one of the major experiments in South Asia about water was done by Rajendra Singh, the waterman of India. And if you talk to him, who gave this idea, who gave this knowledge how to deal with this problem of water scarcity? There was an old man of the village who told him, look, if you want to do something in your life, there is a knowledge tradition that I saw this when I was a child. If you can reuse it, you can solve the problem. And he took that knowledge and practiced that. So therefore, the university's arrogance that university is the only site of knowledge production, this is the arrogance of the modern university, which is not sustainable. I think people have their own knowledge traditions, they have own knowledge, they produce knowledge in practice when they are practicing something. And that is very important. We need to engage with that. How do they solve their, as I said, Chakriya Vikas Yojna is a tribal community experiment done in Jharkhand, where some villages brought together their land, started new form of cultivation that produced so much of wealth that they could supply food to another 25 villages. Now, the knowledge that they produce in that process, the universities would go and acquire that knowledge. How to deal with issues when the wealth is being created, how to distribute that wealth properly so that there is no conflict in society. So all these things I think people are producing when they are practicing. University, the role of the university is to accumulate that, refine that, produce that in a book form so that it can be disseminated. Instead of, we don't produce knowledge in the university mostly. When we undertake research, what do? We go to the field, bring some idea from there and write a book. So we are producing a book based on the knowledge produced by human beings in their everyday life. So we must recognize this production of knowledge being done in the field. And therefore knowledge and practice have to be combined together.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, sir. I have a question. Sir, has any book or author influenced you your own thinking while working on this topic?
Sorry, Aznan, your face is not visible and your question is also not very well audible. Tell me again.
Sir, I'm asking that, is there any book or author that has influenced your thinking when you are working on this topic?
Many of them actually. Many of them, not one or two, so many of them. Of course, the most important influence on me, I would say, on this issue is of Gandhi. If you read Gandhi carefully, he is a South Asian thinker. Then I am influenced deeply by Rumi, I am influenced deeply by Kabir, and also some of the modern writers. I can give you some reading list if you want.
Sure, sir, sure.
Yes, one more question is from Ms. Priyanka.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
My question is, we have impact of colonialism in our country, sir, which affected our nature also. Like earlier, we used to pray for the nature, but now it has been changed.
Yes, we are changing. Not that on the ground level things have not changed as yet. If you look at people, the way they treat their rivers, in the urban area that has changed. In the rural area, even today, I think there is some kind of resource left. I give an example. There was a village in which a landlord had to sell off all the trees that he had in bulk. So the villagers came to him and told him that you cannot do this. He said, you can take the fruits of the trees, you can take timber out of it also sometimes, but if you sell off all of them, the birds coming to our village, where will they take shelter? Or when we go somewhere on the roadside, your tree is standing, we take some shelter there in the sun. You cannot do this. And the fellow had to stop. So people still don't have this idea. Somebody has worked with me on water, and her argument is that if you look at the discourse of movements around water, most of the discourse begin with the idea that water is a collective resource and Coca-Cola has taken it over. That is not fair. So go to Prachimada, the same kind of thing you will see. Go to Rajendra Singh's place, you will find that the idea that hooks people is that nature belongs to everybody. So I think in the collective consciousness, these ideas are still very dominant. May not be supported by the state, may not be supported by the elites, but masses still are guided by that. I give you an example and to prove my point. Have you seen a movie called Drishyam?
Yes, sir.
So I watched it several times. You know why? I wanted to know how do people respond to Ajay Devgan's dodging the police. And every time Ajay Devgan defeated the police, people clapped.
Yeah.
Isn't it? What does that mean? That means that people do have their own idea of justice. Legally he was wrong, but ethically he was right. And people were standing with whom? Ethics. This is very common. I have several examples to prove the point that in the collective consciousness, ethics is more important than law. Which means South Asian collective consciousness is different even today. We have to investigate that. How is it constituted? Of course, there is a conflict between modernity and tradition, but yet I think everything is not over as yet. Isn't it very close to what the story by Premchand called Panch Parameshwar? If you read Panch Parameshwar, a similar kind of idea. So I have many examples to give how South Asian collective consciousness is loaded with these traditions of ethics and all that. And we are part of it. You can, in everyday life, you can experience that. I take examples from everyday life of people. And you can
But
also
in the
do it.
name of urbanization, like we are improving the cities, but not most probably we are deforesting.
That's true. That's true. Like we have to learn from the tribal community how for thousands of years they are staying there without destroying their forest. I have a tribal
But
student
nowadays,
who has very interesting arguments.
it is not possible, right, sir?
No, on the question of possibility, we always need to debate. It doesn't look to be possible, but it could be possible. Human beings have made things possible. When we were a slave society, we never thought that coming out from slavery was possible. When we were colonial society, it took time to think that India could be decolonized. So possibility is always a realm of possibility. It can always be expanded, isn't it? But starting thinking is the most important thing. Once people start thinking, that's what Gandhi used to say, that look, once you start thinking yourself as free citizen, your freedom will begin. But then we will start locating means and techniques how to become free. But if you think that it is not possible, then probably it will never be possible. Therefore, perspective is very important. How do you think is very important.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for your profound thoughts. I'm certain your words have left every student here reflecting on how knowledge and practice can coexist meaningfully. It's been truly enriching to hear your perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and wish you all the best for the entire course. I think this is just second lecture, so I hope you will
Yes,
have
sir. Today is the second day.
lecture. Right. I hope you will enjoy the course. Thank you very much. Should I leave now?
Thank you, sir.
May I leave now?
Yes, sir. You may leave.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.